Hi, this is Eve with True Crime and Coke. You are about to listen to an EDUsode. These are shorter episodes dedicated to educational information ranging from forensic terminology, crime facts, body processes, to interesting FBI files. But if you want to hear anything about true crime, disappearances, conspiracies, hauntings, and anything strange or unusual, then go to one of my regular episodes. Disclaimer: I am not associated in any way to the criminal or medical field. So in other words, I may not even know what I'm talking about. Now that that's out of the way, let's begin.
I don't think there's another person that did what I'd like it to do. I'm thinking the only one in the world. And that's not an honor. That is a curse.
Little was sentenced to 3 life terms in 2014 for killing 3 women. But now investigators are asking the public to help identify his many other victims.
The first thing I picked up on is how wicked smart he was. This guy
smart.
Like genius.
Why?
Yes,
Why do you say that?
Oh, well, number one, the photographic memory, his memory for details.
Holland put that memory to use and gave Little, who likes to sketch, art supplies. Little drew around 50 of his victims.
Wow. These are all of his drawings.
These are all his.
1972?
Right, yes.
When you come up in there,
Over the course of 700 hours of interviews while in prison for murdering 3 women, Little confessed to Texas Ranger James Holland that he killed many more.
What city did you kill the most in?
Miami and Los Angeles.
And how many did you kill in Los Angeles?
Los Angeles, approximately 20.
The 79-year-old is believed to have murdered 93 people in 19 states from 1970 to 2005. Little's confessions have led to answers for many people, like Damian Christie, who was 14 when his mother was killed.
They say that, do you have closure? And I kind of look at it as like, well, I have answers.
But for Holland, it won't be over until all of Little's victims are identified.
It's kind of like never ending. You have to continue. You have to finish it.
Well, just last week, Deputy Holland received 3 new sketches. He continues to encourage Little to draw because Little is in poor health. Holland says the race is on to identify all the serial killer's alleged victims while he's still alive and still cooperating.
Samuel Little, otherwise known as the choke and stroke killer, was given this nickname by the LAPD because he often masturbated after his kills. He is one of the serial killers who has flown most under the radar over the years. Samuel Little may have killed as many as 93 people by knocking them unconscious and then strangling them to death. It is remarkable that Samuel Little got away with killing so many people. People often lose sleep over the thought of just how many serial killers that are out there and still on the loose. But it's people like Little who are the stuff of nightmares, constantly succeeding in evading the law. To put his crimes in perspective, let's compare him to 3 very well-known U.S. serial killers. First one being Gary Ridgway. He had approximately 71 to maybe a little over 90 victims, and he operated from 1982 until 2000 when he was caught, managing to evade the police for 8 years. Next, we have the infamous Ted Bundy, who had a victim count of 36 or possibly more, and he operated between 1974 to 1978 until he was caught, evading police for a total of 4 years. Of course, he was caught and ran away in between some of that, but nonetheless, evaded for 4 years. Then we have John Wayne Gacy with a victim count of 34, possibly more, and he operated between 1972 to 1978, evading the police for 6 years. Now, Samuel Little has a victim count of 93, and he operated from 1970 to 2005. So that is 35 years. That is a long time to evade police, and yes, he did kill prostitutes and drug addicts. So you think, okay, well, that's probably why he got away with it for so long. But Gary Ridgway also killed prostitutes and was caught within 8 years. So what is the average span of a serial killer's career? That is actually the hardest question to answer, as serial killers tend not to quit. They usually only stop when they are caught. The FBI states that the average male serial killer has a career span of 2 to 3 years, and female serial killers lasting almost 11 years. Often, females are rarely caught as 1. They don't hang around after the murder, 2. They tend not to take souvenirs, and 3. They usually kill by poisoning, which means they don't have to be in the same room, street, or country as their victim. And that is the reason why it is so incredible and rare that Samuel Little got away for 35 years. And I am just going to be quiet for a few seconds so you can hear what I go through and how loud my dog snores. So listen. And of course, she's doing it quiet now. So, why am I talking about Samuel Little, the serial killer, on an EDUsode? Well, because first I have to talk about the FBI before I can start Samuel Little's story. Let's talk about VICAP, or the Violent Criminal Apprehension Program. It is a unit of the United States Federal Bureau of Investigation responsible for the analysis of serial violent and sexual crimes, organizationally situated within the Critical Incident Responses Group, CIRG, National Center for the Analysis of Violent Crime, NCAVC. VICAP was created in 1985 by the FBI out of Quantico, Virginia. Pierce Brooks was appointed as the first director, primarily because as a homicide detective in Los Angeles, he had been the first to propose the idea. Brooks was inspired by the Harvey Glattman case he had worked on, which he realized serial homicides could be linked by their signature aspects. Brooks would later obtain a $35,000 government grant in an attempt to realize his idea. In 1982, he met with Robert Ressler to discuss the idea and was convinced by Ressler that VICAP should be located at Quantico as opposed to Lakewood, where Brooks originally planned to have it housed. It is designed to track and correlate information on violent crime, especially murder. The FBI provides the software for the database, which is widely used by state and local law enforcement agencies to compile information on the following: sexual assault cases, solved and unsolved homicides, especially those involving a kidnapping, or if they are apparently motiveless, sexual, or random, or suspected to be part of a series. Missing persons, where foul play is suspected. Unidentified persons, where foul play is suspected. Cases fitting these categories can be entered into the system by law enforcement officials and compared to other cases in an attempt to correlate and match possible connections. VICAP has been a tool in solving many cases, including cases decades old and cases in widely separated states. VICAP is particularly valuable in identifying and tracking serial killers, where separate victims might not otherwise be connected as part of the same pattern. The aforementioned pattern that links serial homicides is what is commonly referred to as signature. VICAP operates under the knowledge that serial homicides are almost always sexually and control-driven, with a consistent evolving signature present in each murder. In the summer of 2008, the VICAP program made its database available to all law enforcement agencies through a secure internet link. This allows for real-time access to the database and allows agencies to enter and update cases directly into the database. VICAP actually is what discovered Samuel Little's connection to so many murders. Here is how it went down. In September of 2008, 2012, Samuel Little was arrested at a Kentucky homeless shelter and extradited to California, where he was wanted on a narcotics charge. Once he was in custody, Los Angeles Police Department detectives obtained a DNA match to Little on the victims in 3 unsolved homicides from 1987 and 1989 and charged him with 3 counts of murder. For these crimes, Little was convicted and sentenced in 2014 to 3 consecutive life sentences with no possibility of parole. In all 3 cases, the women had been beaten and then strangled, their bodies dumped in an alley, a dumpster, and a garage. Little asserted his innocence throughout his trial, even as a string of women testifying for the prosecution told of narrowly surviving similarly violent encounters with Little. When Los Angeles got the DNA hit on Little, they asked the FBI's VICAP program to work up a full background on him. The FBI found an alarming pattern and compelling links to many more murders. VICAP reached out to the Texas Rangers with one clear connection. We found a case out of Odessa, Texas that sounded very much like him, and we could place him passing through the area around the same time, said VICAP crime analyst Christina Palazzolo, who worked on the case with Angela Williamson, who was a Department of Justice senior policy advisor and VICAP liaison. We sent that lead out to Texas Rangers, who were eager to follow up on the long, cold case. When Palazzolo and Williamson accompanied Ranger James Hall to California to interview Little in the spring of 2018, the convicted murderer was hoping to move prisons. In exchange for a move, Little was willing to talk. Over the course of that interview in May, said Palazzolo, he was sitting down the hall combing through data with Williamson. He went through city and state and gave Ranger Holland the number of people he killed in each place. Jackson, Mississippi, 1. Cincinnati, Ohio, 1. Phoenix, Arizona, 3. Las Vegas, Nevada, 1. In total, Little confessed to 90 killings, and Palazzolo and Williamson have been working to match up evidence to as many confessions as they can. So far, the team has confirmed 34 killings, with many more pending confirmation. There are still a number of Little's confessions that remain uncorroborated. William and Palazzolo say Little remembers his victims and the killings in great detail. He remembers where he was and what car he was driving. He draws the pictures of many of the women he killed. He is less reliable, however, when it comes to remembering dates. Little's uncertain timeline has created a verification challenge for the VICAP team, along with issues stemming from the victims Little targeted, his methods, and how much he moved around. Features of his crimes that begin to explain how he got away with murder for decades. From the time Little dropped out of high school and left his Ohio home in the late 1950s, he lived a nomadic life. Palazzolo and Williamson said he would shoplift and steal in a city or town to gather the money to buy alcohol and drugs, but never stayed in one place for long. He would drive from New Jersey to California in a matter of days, reports Palazzolo, and when he had his many run-ins with police, they often just wanted to shoo him out of town. Little chose to kill marginalized and vulnerable women who were often involved in prostitution and addicted to drugs. Their bodies sometimes went unidentified and their deaths uninvestigated. Little's method of killing also didn't always leave the obvious signs that the death was a homicide. The one-time competitive boxer usually stunned or knocked out his victims with powerful punches and then strangled them. With no stab marks or bullet wounds, many of these deaths were not classified as homicides but attributed to drug overdoses, accidents, or natural causes. In addition, DNA evidence was often not available or could not provide a clear link back to Little. A large number of the killings occurred in the 1970s and early 1980s before DNA profiling was part of the law enforcement toolbox. After DNA analysis came into play, the victims' work as prostitutes complicated the ability of police to gather telling physical evidence. After Holland interviewed Little, he was indicted for the Odessa homicide and extradited to Texas a few months later. He remains in the custody of Odessa, but has been housed in Wise County for some time to be closer to Holland, who has been conducting nearly daily interviews to create the most accurate accounting possible of Little's crimes. Palazzolo and Williamson have continued to gather new information from these interviews and are examining every tie they can find, from mortuary records and death certificates to cold case files. The biggest lesson in this case is the power of information sharing, said Kevin Fitzsimmons, VICAP's supervisory crime analyst. These connections all started in our database of violent crime. Palazzolo and Williamson said the cases that were recorded in VICAP made for early and easy connections. The absence of data on so many others is what has made confirming Little's accounts difficult and is perhaps part of what allowed his crimes to continue for so long. A Jane Doe who turned up dead in an alley in New Orleans may look like an isolated event, but when entered into the VICAP database and examined with other mysterious deaths or missing persons, patterns emerge. This is the value of VICAP, says Fitzsimmons. Right now, Little is in poor health and will likely stay in prison in Texas until his death. The goal now is to identify his victims and provide closure and justice in unsolved cases. VICAP is also hoping this case will serve as a reminder to every jurisdiction of the importance of consistent violent crime reporting. And one thing I will say is that the confirmation of 34 victims has almost doubled that since this interview with Palazzolo and Williams and Holland in 2018. So on the next EDUsode, we will continue and talk more about Samuel Little and his whole life and the victims and the drawings and the confessions. So have a good evening.